My entitled sisters demanded that I let them rent out my vacation home for profit. When I refused, their husbands broke in and are now facing charges. What happened today? My folks decided to host a barbecue because I guess that's what older people do. I declined because I really don't like my two sisters, their husbands, or their kids. My wife and I are child-free. Mom then pressured my wife, and long story short, we went. By the time we arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already solidly buzzed, drunk really. My mom was spending 100% of her time trying to keep the nieces and nephews, ages 7 to 11, under control. My dad had strategically retreated to the whirlpool part of the pool with a small cooler full of beers. My wife and I made small talk with miscellaneous people, ate food, and had a frozen margarita. The sisters' husbands took turns criticizing us for being late, not being in our swimsuits, and screwing up the vibe. Whatever, typical suburban summer get-together. About 45 minutes in, two of the kids ran at one of the neighbor's guests who was standing next to the pool and pushed her in. She was at the pool steps, stumbled in but didn't fall, so only got half wet. She was clearly very unhappy about it, but didn't make a scene. She just went over to where the parents were, grabbed their towels, dried herself off, and left. The sisters and their husbands thought it was all great fun. A bit later, I was standing a few feet away from the pool, chatting with someone, when I saw three of the kids running full tilt at me from the corner of my eye. Obviously, I was next, but it's not terribly difficult to outwit young kids, so I just jumped out of their way at the last second. All three of them ran straight into the pool at full speed. Most of the other guests, including my wife and me, started laughing, but their moms, who, as I mentioned, were pretty shit-faced, absolutely freaked out. Apparently, two of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were in swimsuits. Since I wasn't in swim gear, I stepped back from the pool and let other people fish the kids out. The kids were bawling their heads off, like they'd lost a limb. At that point, all hell broke loose. The four drunk parents were yelling at everyone in general, and me in particular, for nearly letting their kids drown, and also because two of the kids had been videoing the trick using their parents' iPhones, which were now at the bottom of the pool. One of my brothers-in-law got into the pool to try to retrieve the phones, but his BMI and BAC made that impossible. No one else volunteered to help, unsurprisingly, since my sisters were still bitching at everyone. I told my sisters it was their job to watch their kids, and that if anything had happened to them, it would have been their responsibility, not mine. There were some pretty strong words on both sides. My wife and I left after the other brother-in-law fell over and face-planted while yelling at us. Now they're saying I should have let the little shits knock me into the pool, have their fun, and ruin my phone. Side note. Dad, of course, never got out of the whirlpool. Relevant comments/thoughts from OP. I realize they're just kids, and we're just having fun. The fact that they thought this was okay is more of a reflection on their parents than on them. I just wish we hadn't gone. It's nice to see my folks and their neighbors, but I really don't like my sisters or their husbands. They don't hide their envy of us, and they're just exhausting to be around. More about why I don't care for some of my family. It's more of an oil and water sort of thing. I've never been close to my sisters. They're 8 and 10 years older than me. I also don't have much in common with their husbands. They're okay guys, but I just don't give a crap about the things that are important to them, and vice versa. I do know that the four of them are somewhat envious of our lifestyle. Both sisters are stay-at-home moms. Both their husbands make good money. One makes noticeably more than I do, but both my wife and I have professional careers. We don't have kids, and we're much more responsible with money as a result. We have a lot more investments, etc., and we don't have to drive cars full of kid debris. We take nice trips once or twice a year. It definitely grates on both sisters and, by extension, their husbands, so we get some petty behavior from them on an ongoing basis. Overall, neither my wife nor I enjoy their company, which is why I wanted to skip the get-together. It just wasn't worth it to me, but my wife is a positive person and is usually happy to see them. Hopefully, next time, she won't feel guilt into going. That's probably the one positive thing that will come out of this. Update, August 17th, 2023. First off, my folks tell me that my nieces and nephews are all good swimmers and that they use the pool all the time. The 7-year-old is still a beginner but loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim, which is a bit misleading. To be fair, none of the kids are allowed in the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was the two 10-year-olds and the 9-year-old who tried to push me into the pool. After we left, the party ended on a pretty sour note. My drunk brother-in-law, who face-planted while yelling at me, had to go to urgent care to get his face stitched up. He was too toasted to drive, so Dad took him. Dad was very not happy about this. Later that evening, my sister started a group text and said some really nasty things. Their husbands threw in a few comments as well. My wife and I blocked the four of them.
My mom called me.
She was pretty upset about what they said. She and Dad were in the chat, and I don't blame her. Because of the texts, my folks insisted that my sisters and their husbands come over the next day, Sunday, without their kids, to get some things straight and lay down some ground rules. Mom's wording. The result was a contrite, if unenthusiastic, apology from the siblings via my mom's phone. I'm glad my wife was with me when they called. Her hard stares kept me from saying what I wanted to. I just told them thanks, and that we felt no need to discuss it further, since I thought things were settled. I unblocked them, but that evening I got a text from one of the husbands asking when I'd be paying for the phones, which cost $1 for X, or whatever. WTF. I replied, never. Took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my folks with a note that we were done with this nonsense. We're going no contact with my sisters and their spouses, and not to invite us to any more holidays or get-togethers if they're going to be there. Then I blocked the sisters and their spouses again. The really hit the fan. Dad called them and ripped them a new one. Among other things, he told them the grandkids were not welcome at his place indefinitely since my mom regularly provides free babysitting. That got them pretty rattled. He also banned them from using the vacation house and told them that my wife and I actually own it, not he and mom. This completely freaked them out. Both of my sisters' families use the place a lot, including having their friends up for weekend getaways. This was very much out of character for my folks. They clearly had it. For reference, I never wanted my sisters to know we owned the place. We bought it for my folks. They'd always wanted a place in the mountains. Keeping the ownership quiet was just a way to avoid drama with my siblings. Update to the update, August 26th, 2023. It's been an interesting last few days. I thought things had hit the fan before, but it was more of a fart compared to what's happened this week. For this to make sense, I need to provide some financial context. My folks have never been any good at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I know pretty much everything about them financially. Their house is paid for and they have minimal debt, but they didn't save much for retirement. Both of them get Social Security. Dad gets a solid pension and they have a bit of savings, but there's no treasure chest in the basement. I bought their current car for them after they retired as a retirement present, so they'd have something nice to drive. It was the first car in probably 20 years that they didn't lease. My sisters are convinced my folks are dripping with money and that they'll be leaving everything to them, since I don't need more money. But they've never cared about saving either. It turns out my oldest sister and her husband, they have 3 kids, have been living beyond their means for some time and are in financial straits. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car leases to the point that one is about to be repossessed. He bragged in the past about making X per year, but it turns out it's about half that. She confessed all this to Mom on Tuesday because they need a loan, and because this was a WTF moment for Mom and Dad. She admitted that for the last 3 years, instead of staying at the vacation house regularly, she's been renting it out once a month or so and pocketing the cash. We're talking $2,000 plus for a weekend and at least $4,000 for a week. With her being cut off from using the place, she's had to cancel one group already, and now she's worried they'll lose everything. My folks aren't in any position to give them a loan, but now they're both extremely stressed out. Dad is mainly just pissed off about it all. I know he feels betrayed, and I imagine he's embarrassed that he's in no position to help his daughter out. He did reiterate that as long as it's up to him, the girls won't be using the vacation home anytime soon. Update 5, November 27th, 2023, 1.5 months later. I wrote most of this yesterday but decided to wait before posting. It's been a whirlwind, and I'm still wound up. Apologies if it's a bit rambling, but so much has happened, and things have gone from bad to worse. Here's the short version. My brothers-in-law broke into the vacation home and were arrested. They've been charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and communicating threats, Class 1 misdemeanors. I refuse to drop the charges, though I might consider it if they fully pay for the damages they caused. As of Saturday evening, they were still in jail, though I assume they're out by now. I thought things were starting to settle down. It had been over 6 weeks since I'd heard from my sisters. My parents went up to the house for a week and had a good time. David, the property manager I hired, has been great. He's handled a few repairs and checks the property every week or 2. He also sends photos of wildlife or sunsets, which makes me want to get up there. I was planning a visit for after Thanksgiving, but that changed Friday. My brothers-in-law showed up at the vacation home. They used an angle grinder to cut through the chain on the driveway gate, damaging it in the process. They tried to break in through the front door, ruined the lock set, and gouged the door. When that didn't work, they finally forced their way in through a utility door. They also broke into the barn for reasons I'm not sure of. That's when they were met by sheriff's deputies. David gets notifications from the camera system whenever there's activity. He saw what was going on, called the sheriff's department, and the deputies arrived just as my brothers-in-law were leaving through the front door. According to David, they tried to play it off, but the deputies weren't buying it. Breaking into an empty house is a serious crime, especially in a rural area. They were arrested and freaked out big time, making threats about how they'd beat the hell out of me. Not exactly the smartest thing to say in front of cops. David and the sheriff's office tried calling my wife and me to see what we wanted to do, but we were spending the day with our parents and had left our phones in the car. By the time we checked our phones, I had a ton of missed calls and messages from my mom, dad, David, and the sheriff's department. It was a real mood killer. I was angry, no surprise there. I called David for the rundown on the situation and how bad the damage was. That only made me angrier. I ended Friday by calling the sheriff's department and making it clear that the brothers-in-law had no right to be on my property, and I wanted to press charges. I didn't call my folks back, barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call them. They were both rattled, especially my mom. My sisters had pressured them into asking me to drop the charges and claim it was all a misunderstanding. I flat out refused. I told them there was no way I was dropping the charges until I spoke with an attorney and was fully compensated for the damages. My mom was crying by the time we got off the phone. That only made me feel worse, but my dad suggested it might be time for a complete fresh start, though he did agree that my brothers-in-law should pay for the damage. I still haven't been up to the property yet. There's nothing I can do, and I know I'll lose it when I see the damage in person. The photos I've seen are bad enough. I'm hoping to get up there by tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job doesn't really allow for spontaneous trips. I've already left messages with 2 attorney friends, asking them to recommend the right lawyers for the situation. I'm hoping to get restraining orders and possibly sue for the money my sisters and brothers-in-law made renting out the house. I don't really care about the money, but it would make their lives as miserable as possible. The gloves are definitely off at this point. A couple of side notes. My brothers-in-law had no idea I hired someone to monitor the property or that there are cameras now. My parents knew but hadn't told them, figuring it would just stir up more drama. There are signs on the property stating it's being monitored, along with no trespassing signs. My wife has completely had it with everything. She's been patient throughout all of this, but this was the last straw. She told me it's up to me how I deal with it, but she thinks it's time to teach my sisters and their husbands a hard lesson. Older brother-in-law likely won't face any repercussions at his job, but middle brother-in-law has a security clearance, so he might. I'm hoping that will motivate him to pay for the damages immediately. David, the property manager, has an interesting background, which I'll elaborate on later. For now, I'm just trying to get everything sorted and deal with the fallout. Update, December 2nd, 2023. 5 days later. I didn't think I'd be posting again so soon, but a lot has happened in the last 2 days. Short version, I think we've finally turned a corner on this situation. Thursday afternoon, I received an envelope at my office. It contained a signed letter from both of my brothers-in-law, along with a cashier's check for $5,000. In the letter, they offered what I can only describe as a very sincere apology. They acknowledged breaking in, admitted it was wrong, said the $5,000 was to cover the damages, and offered to pay more if needed. They also promised they would stay away from the vacation home unless my wife, and I specifically invited them. They asked that I do whatever I can to get the charges dropped, as they could both lose their jobs over this. They're willing to agree to a restraining order or any other terms to make that happen. To say I was surprised would be an understatement. This was a total 180 from their previous behavior. At the time, I'd already set up a meeting with an attorney to discuss taking legal action against my in-laws for the damage and possibly seeking a restraining order. I called him right away and told him about the letter, and he agreed to meet with me at the end of the day, rather than waiting for our scheduled meeting next week. My attorney recommended I not deposit the check right away. We met for about 2 hours, and he suggested my wife and I settle with all 4 of them, both sisters and their husbands, by signing a mutual release agreement. He said if we decided to go to court, we'd likely win, but it would take at least 2 years, involve high upfront legal fees, and we might never see the money. He also said that if we accepted the check, we could keep the $5,000 for ourselves, even without letting them off the hook. He's drafting the agreement, which should be ready by Monday. The property manager gave me a rough estimate for repairs, about $4,000, mostly to fix the front door. On Friday, my attorney contacted the Bills, explained what we were proposing, and advised them to hire their own lawyers. They both agreed. The middle brother-in-law said they could either pay for the damages or pay for a lawyer, but not both, since they have no defense for what happened. He seemed more focused on getting the charges dropped. From what I can tell, they're willing to do anything to resolve this, sign anything, agree to anything, to make the whole situation go away. My attorney also reached out to the DA's office to discuss the possibility of dropping the charges. He left a message with the prosecutor and hasn't heard back yet. He believes the charges will likely be dropped because the Bills are paying for the damages and don't have any prior offenses. but he cautioned that he's not a criminal lawyer. He also said I should be ready to drive up there Monday or Tuesday to speak directly with the prosecutor and push for a dismissal. He advised me to continue maintaining no contact with my sisters and their husbands for at least 6 months and to strictly follow the terms of the agreement for any future interactions. I believe the Bills have realized what's at stake for them: legal fees, fines, and the possibility of jail time, up to 120 days. One of them also has a job with a security clearance that could be in jeopardy. This might be their last chance to keep their lives from falling apart. This isn't a perfect resolution, but it does help me close this chapter of legal and financial stress. I highly doubt I'll ever have a friendly relationship with any of them again, and I'm okay with that. Right now, what I want most is to move on and never have to speak to any of them again. I'm really drained by all of this. My wife feels the same way. Kind of a side note, getting the written apology was oddly a huge moment for me. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess it matters more than I realized. The money is less important to me at this point, but I'll definitely take it. Also, I'm pretty sure my middle sister and her husband came up with the money themselves. The cashier's check is from the credit union where he works. Once the agreement is signed, I'll make one more update, probably just an edit to this post. Apologies for the lengthy updates, but writing about all this has helped me process everything, and reading everyone's thoughts has been really valuable. I truly appreciate all the support. I really hope none of you ever have to go through something like this. Relevant comment. When I finally got home Thursday night, I felt a huge wave of relief, thinking this might all be over. I'm not going to discuss the settlement with my parents until it's signed by everyone. My sisters and brothers-in-law can talk to them if they want, but I'm staying out of it. This is between me and them. Final update, December 7th, 2023. Tuesday morning, December 7th, 2023. 5 days later. I met with my attorney this morning to go over the agreement. We made a few minor changes, and then he sent it off to my sisters and brothers-in-law. The agreement includes a clause that they pay my attorney's fees, about $3,000. They weren't thrilled about that and tried to negotiate it away, but the attorney told them that it was non-negotiable. Either accept the agreement as is, or we'll proceed with the lawsuit. They came in and signed the agreement today. I wasn't there, but I'm told it was tense. The middle brother-in-law seemed to take charge, and at one point, told both of my sisters to stop talking or he was walking away and making his own deal with us. He then said the rest of them could figure things out on their own. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claiming that's all they could manage. It's close enough, so we're accepting it as the final payment. Yesterday, I drove up to the vacation house to assess the damage and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage made my blood boil. It was so senseless, and I was furious. At that point, I seriously considered just paying for the repairs myself and doing everything I could to make their lives difficult. But after talking to a good friend for over an hour, I calmed down and refocused on the bigger picture, putting all of this behind me. I'm still not entirely sure I'm doing the right thing, but I've calmed down enough to move forward. The DA's office confirmed that they're willing to drop all charges except for trespassing, which will be classified as a Class 2 misdemeanor. The Bills will have to plead guilty and pay any fine the judge sets. If they cause any more trouble, it'll go very badly for them. The agreement includes a no-contact clause. If they show up where my wife or I are, or if we run into them, the last person to arrive must leave immediately. The only contact allowed is through our attorneys or mutually agreed third parties. They get to keep any money they made from renting the vacation house unless there are tax consequences, which they will be responsible for. Once we sign the agreement, I won't be able to talk much more about this. But I'll continue to respond to comments when I can. Posting about this whole ordeal and reading your feedback has been incredibly helpful. I appreciate all the support, and I'm glad I could share this story with you. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.